Don't we all feel trapped in a financial system that no longer serves our needs? The first step toward transforming this global system begins by understanding how it works. American elites want the USA to be the Amazon of the world, selling anyone, anywhere goods made in China, but perhaps designed in California. We have every reason to suspect that the USA and China are already engaged in a closely knit alliance, and that talks of a so-called Thucydides trap leading to a world war between China and America are pure speculative fiction. The USA can't do without China's industry. Both China and the USA have a vested interest in stoking an armed conflict between Europe and Russia. A Europe in ruins then becomes a slave market for whatever the US wants to do with it. And Russian resources are then up for grabs for Chinese industry. In a way, the US is China's army, and China is the US's manufacturing base. The US military wages wars for resources around the world, and the control of these resources is then concentrated in the hands of US-based Western plutocrats and billionaires. This American elite is multiracial, including Arabs, Indians, Jews, Africans, and of course, a bunch of old white guys. The USA then becomes the dispenser of wealth, of technology, of goods and services to the rest of the world, paid for in US dollars and marketed by Hollywood. Europe today, in the form of the European Union, is but a servant of the USA. Not really an ally, but rather a slave who can be ordered to sacrifice himself for his master. The idea for the war against Russia is also to carve up Russia into multiple smaller nations that can then be more easily controlled, namely for its resources. That's what the war in Ukraine is all about. Russia had been mining Ukrainian resources and processing them into manufactured goods until NATO decided they didn't want to allow Russia to get wealthy any longer. Trump's claim that he wants to annex Canada and Greenland has to do with these territories' vast resources and with the even greater resources still buried underneath the North Pole ocean floor. By claiming Canada and Greenland, and perhaps Iceland and Scandinavia as well, the US could then argue that they have the longest border along the North Pole and therefore should legally be allowed to exploit the Arctic region. They're trying to cut Russia out of the Arctic. As a European, I want to know the answer to this question. Can we break out of this globalist prison? And the answer is yes, of course, because this kind of system will not last forever anyway. Due to the law of diminishing returns, any complex economic system ultimately falls apart, because the complexity itself ends up costing more than the benefits reaped by it. Global financial systems can fall apart in several ways. Either the US dollar loses its value, perhaps due to the corruption of its once morally high-standing culture, and we switch to a different currency so that the US may no longer be able to fund its military and won't be able to coerce the world to continue paying for things like oil in dollars. Another possibility is that the money system itself eventually loses its appeal, and that the people will move toward autarkic systems of survival that don't require that much money, but rather go the way of, say, the Amish. Namely, by having well-organized communities where skilled and motivated neighbors help build each other's houses. This is what I'm aiming for. If I had the power, I would transform Europe and Europeans by disconnecting ourselves from the global financial system. I call it the post-financial world. A world in which money is no longer the dominant idea. Instead, we become a labor and skill-based society where participants donate their abilities to their people in exchange for a plot to farm or a house to live in. Your abilities become your currency. Indeed, in this system, people with different abilities will achieve different outcomes. And so we embrace inequality because we understand that a well-balanced collection of unequal people who each possess unique and different skills produces the most fruitful society. Financial equality can therefore never be our goal anymore. Our goal is a diversity of competencies. By this new organizing principle, we also leave globalism behind, and naturally we become more nationalistic. We will no longer need to rent the skills we can't afford to develop from faraway lands, but we rather always invest in and develop our own abilities. This shall make all of us more well-rounded people. We become the Homo universalis, the universal man of Leonardo da Vinci. For Europe, however, one of its main abilities will be to train each man to be a warrior. As a race of warrior farmers, we will then be able to withstand any outside threat and be largely left to our own devices as we begin to imagine the civilization of our future.